I want to start today by asking you a question about your bookshelf. If you go home and look at that stack of books on your nightstand, or maybe that carefully curated row of spines in your living room, how many of those did you buy because you read the first page and just, fell in love with the prose? And how many did you buy because you felt like you already knew the person?
That is a very dangerous question to ask in the current economy.
It is, isn't it?
Because if we're all being honest with ourselves, for a lot of people, the answer leans heavily toward that second option. We buy the person first, and the book is just, a souvenir.
A souvenir. That's the exact word. It's the souvenification of literature.
Yeah.
And that is why today we are stepping into a really fascinating, slightly messy and very modern crossfire. We are doing a deep dive into the intersection of social media clout and the literary arts.
Right.
Specifically, we're talking about the YouTuber book and this whole author-tuber phenomenon.
It's a space that, you think about it. It just didn't exist 20 years ago. Not like this.
Not at all.
You used to have writers, solitary figures, and then you had celebrities who hired ghostwriters. But now we have this hybrid creature, the content creator who monetizes their life, builds a massive audience.
It's a huge audience.
And then pivots to writing novels as the next logical step in their empire.
In their brand. It's the next product. And to help us navigate this, we're unpacking a series of transcripts from a commentary channel called Sammy.
Sammy.
Now, if you haven't come across Sammy, he is, let's call him the unfiltered id of the writing community.
That's a good way to put it.
He's a reader, he's a reviewer, and this is the key part, a former aspiring writer who has some incredibly harsh, but I think necessary, truths about what happens when internet fame tries to translate into literary merit.
What drew me to this source material specifically is that Sammy isn't just ranting. He is ranting, let's be clear.
Oh, he's definitely ranting.
But underneath all that anger, he identifies a core conflict that I think really defines the creator economy. It's the tension between building a platform, which demands constant noise, constant content, constant connection.
Right. Always be on.
And the craft of writing, which, historically demands the exact opposite, demands silence, isolation, and a lot of failure in the dark.
The central irony he poses is one that I think a lot of us have felt but maybe haven't put into words. He asks, why is it that the people on the internet who position themselves as experts on writing, the ones teaching you how to plot, how to query, how to build characters, why do they often produce the absolute worst book?
And conversely, why do we, as readers, keep falling for it?
Yeah.
Why do we keep buying books that deep down we kind of suspect are going to be bad?
It's a feedback loop of bad art and valid anger. Okay. So here's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to unpack that whole merchandise versus art debate.
Which is a big one.
It's huge. And we're going to explore a really profound psychological concept that Sammy calls the advantage of silence, which I think applies to anyone learning any difficult skill, not just writing.
Oh, absolutely. And we're definitely going to get into the ethics of it because there's a fine line between, fake it till you make it and actually scamming your audience by selling expertise you don't really possess.
So buckle up. We are going to talk about bad vampires, fake reviews, and why your favorite YouTuber might be the worst writer you've ever read.
It's going to be a ride.
But before we get to the writer, Sammy actually starts by pointing the finger at us, at the readers, or rather a very specific type.
Right. This is what he calls the not for you phenomenon. And I think this is a crucial place to start because it establishes the baseline for what is valid criticism versus what's just noise.
So in the source material, Sammy discusses this trend he sees constantly in the book. You have these grown adults, he specifically calls out men, often in their 30s, who decide to read young adult or YA, fantasy or romance.
Yeah, books that are very, very clearly intended for teenage girls.
Exactly. And then they film themselves just absolutely losing their minds.
The rant review. It's a whole genre of content.
It is.
It gets clicked, anger engages. It's a business model.
But Sammy admits something interesting. He says he used to be this guy. He calls himself part of the problem. He talks about reading books like Twilight or Throne of Glass and just tearing them apart because they didn't follow the, logical rules of storytelling that he valued.
And this is where he has his epiphany. He realized he was suffering from what he calls fuzzy thinking.
Yeah.
He assumed that quality was this single objective vertical.
Like a ladder.
Exactly. If a book was good, it was good for everyone. If he hated it, well, it must be objectively bad. Full stop.
But hang on, I want to push back on this a little bit because, I've read Twilight. I'm not the target demographic, sure, but there are objective measures of writing, aren't there? I mean, grammar, pacing, plot holes. If I go to a restaurant and the steak is burnt, I don't need to be a chef to say it's bad.
That's a fair point, and Sammy actually addresses that. He doesn't say objective quality doesn't exist, but he uses a slightly different analogy, which I think is better. He says it's more like walking into a high-end steakhouse and screaming at the waiter because they don't serve sushi.
Okay, that's different. That's a category error.
It's a total category error. You are judging a product by metrics it was never, ever trying to hit. Let's look at his Twilight example, because I think this really crystallizes the difference between what he calls storycraft and marketing.
Right. He had a really specific gripe about perspective about who was story.
Yes. For years, Sammy argued that Twilight was a failure of storytelling because it was told from Bella Swan's perspective. And his argument, which to be fair is logically sound if you're writing a generic fantasy novel, was that Edward is the interesting character.
Of course he is.
He's a vampire. He's 100 years old. He has the power. He has the ink. A good writer in that framework would center the story on the most dynamic character.
I mean, I would read the Vampire's Diary over the high school student's diary any day of the week.
Exactly. Because you are not a 15-year-old girl looking for a romance proc. And this is what Sammy realized. If Stephenie Meyer had told the story from Edward's perspective, the book would have completely failed its market. The product, the thing being sold, isn't the vampire lore. It's the feeling of being Bella.
It's the projection, the fantasy.
It's 100% the projection,
Yeah.
The swooning, the melodrama, all the stuff he was criticized. That isn't a bug in the soft, it is the operating.
So by demanding the book be better in a literary sense, in his sense, he was actually asking it to be worse in a commercial sense. He was asking it to fail at its primary goal.
Precisely. He realized the author wasn't incompetent. She was just optimizing for a different variable than he. And he had a similar realization with Sarah J. Maas's Throne of Glass.
Okay, that's the one about the assassin, right?
Sure.
Big fantasy.
Allegedly. That's the key word. The back of the book promises this, like Hunger Games style contest to become the king's royal assassin. So Sammy read it expecting, grit, combat, political intrigue, strategy.
With assassin stuff.
Instead, he got pages and pages of descriptions of dresses, flirting, and, all these side romance. So he did a rant review.
Where is the assassin stuff? This is false advertising.
I feel like that's a valid complaint, though. I mean, if I buy a ticket to a boxing match and a fashion show breaks out, I'm going to be confused and probably a little annoyed.
It seems valid on the surface. But then he looked at the comments on his own video. He had fans of the book, thousands of them, telling him, "We don't care about the contest. We are here for the dresses and the flirting."
Oh,
and that's when it clicked. The side romance, the assassin plot was just the window dressing to get all the attractive characters in the same room so they could fall in love.
So his entire critique was, for the intended audience, completely irrelevant. It was irrelevant to the people who actually buy the books and make them bestsellers. He brings up Shadow and Bone as a third example. He hated the protagonist, Alina Starkov. Hated her. He thought she was boring, a plain Jane, basically a cardboard cutout with no personality. And he hated the love triangle tropes.
The two hot, powerful guys fighting over the ordinary girl trope, a classic.
It is a classic for a very specific reason. And he realized those tropes are features, not bugs. They're designed for that demographic. Alina is plain so that the reader can easily step into her shoes. If she were too specific, too quirky, too distinct, it becomes harder for the reader to self-insert into the fantasy.
It's a blank slate.
It's a blank slate by design. And it leads into this quote. He says, "The obvious isn't always obvious if you are blind to it." And that leads him to a really mature conclusion for a rant reviewer. He promises to stop reviewing books that aren't for him because it's intellectually dishonest. It's easy to dunk on Twilight for click, but it doesn't actually tell us anything useful about the quality of the work within its own context.
Okay, so that establishes the reader side of the equation. We need to be smarter critics. We need to ask, who is this book for? Before we ask, is this book good?
Exactly.
But now let's pivot. Let's get to the writer side of things, because this deep dive isn't just about reading bad books. It's about why they get written.
And specifically, why they get written by people who live their entire lives on the internet.
Sammy breaks this down into two distinct categories, and I really like this distinction because they feel so different. Their failure modes are different. You have type 1, the big influencer, and you have type 2, the author.
Let's start with type 1. This is what Sam calls the merch trap.
The merch track.
Right. So type 1 is the creator who has millions of subscribers in a completely non-writing niche. Maybe they do beauty tutorials, or they're a gamer, or they do daily vlogs. They have a massive loyal audience who will buy anything they put their name on.
And usually that's a t-shirt or a lipstick collaboration or a branded coffee mug, simple merch.
Exactly. But eventually, the growth path leads them to decide to release a novel. And Sammy points to Sasha Alsberg and her book Zenith as the perfect, almost platonic ideal of this phenomenon.
Zenith. Yeah, the source material was, let's just say, not kind book.
A horrent read is the direct quote from Sammy. He says he couldn't even get past the 20% mark. But what's so interesting is why he hated it so much. It wasn't just that the grammar was shaky or the plot was, derivative.
So it wasn't just technically bad.
It was something deeper. He said the book felt cynical.
Cynical how? What does that mean for a book?
He argues that for these mega influencers, a book isn't a piece of art. It's just another SKU in their online shop. It's a product designed from the ground up to extract money from a loyal fan base, not a piece of art designed to express a human experience. In his words, it lacks humanity.
That's a heavy criticism. He actually contrasts this with Shadow and Bone, right? Even though he didn't like the main character in Shadow and Bone. He admitted the prose was competent, the world building was solid, the editing was professional. He said it felt like a real book, made by people who cared about making a real. Zenith, in his view, felt like a prop, like something you'd see on a movie set that's just a cover with blank page side.
He brings up the George Lucas argument here, which I thought was a really great and kind of surprising touch.
Yeah, walk me through that. Because George Lucas gets a lot of flack for the prequels, but Sammy actually defends him.
He defends the impulse behind it. He says that when George Lucas made Star Wars, even the really weird parts, even Jar Jar Binks.
Especially Jar Jar Binks.
He put his soul into it. It was a passion project. It was specifically his vision. It wasn't content designed by a marketing team. Sammy's argument is that art, even flawed art, requires that spark of obsession. But these influencer books, they feel mass-produced. They feel like they were written by a committee or a ghostwriter to hit a quarterly revenue target.
That is the perfect analogy. It's the difference between a home-cooked meal, even if it's slightly burnt, and a frozen TV dinner. One has intent and love, even if it failed. The other just has preservatives.
Exactly. And listeners, readers, they can smell that lack of intent from a mile away. It just feels hollow. But here's the thing. Type 1, the big influencer book, it's annoying, but it's kind of expected.
Right. The bar's low. We know the beauty guru probably didn't write that 600-page sci-fi epic by herself in a cabin.
We buy it to support them, to have a piece of them, not because we expect war and peace.
But type 2?
But type 2. Oh, this is where the betrayal happens.
Right.
This is the category that seems to genuinely infuriate Sam. The author tuber.
The expert trap.
The expert trap. These are not general lifestyle influencers. These are YouTubers whose entire channel, their whole brand, is dedicated to giving writing advice.
Right.
They position themselves as teachers, as gurus. They make videos like how to write great dialogue, 10 mistakes new writers make, how to structure a best-selling plot. They're the experts.
Which creates a very, very specific expectation. If I watch a fitness coach give me advice on how to do a perfect squat for years, and then I see them try to lift a 20-pound weight and their back just snaps in half, I'm going to have some serious questions.
That is the perfect analogy. And that's exactly what Sammy says happened. He claims that 99% of these author tubers release books that are, in his words, terrible. And it creates this massive psychological disconnect. You watch someone confidently explain the nuance of show, don't tell for an hour.
And then you open their book, and it is 300 pages of, he was angry, she was sad, the room was big.
It's all telling. It just breaks the illusion of competence. It forces you to ask, do you actually know what you're talking about, or are you just really good at reciting the theory? Are you a practitioner, or are you just a lecturer?
And that, I think, leads us to the core question of this entire deep dive. Why does this keep happening? Why do these supposed experts fail so hard when they actually have to put... Is it just a lack of talent? Or is the internet itself, the platform, doing something?
Sammy has a theory for this. And honestly, when I read this part of the transcript, I had to put my phone down and just stare at the wall for a minute.
It hits hard.
It hits very hard. He calls it the advantage of silence.
Advantage?
It is a profound idea. His argument is essentially this, and it's a quote: "The greatest advantage a writer can be given is not to be paid attention to."
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's really get into the weeds here, because we live in a world that screams the absolute opposite.
A total opposite.
Build in public, document the journey, monetize your process. We are told constantly that sharing our progress is the key to success and building an audience.
And Sammy argues that for deep skill acquisition, that is a dangerous lie. Think about how learning actually works. To truly master a craft, whether it's writing or coding or playing the violin, anything difficult, you need to fail a lot.
You have to be bad at it first.
You have to be bad at it. You need to produce absolute garbage. You need to write a scene, realize it's clunky as hell, and have the freedom to just delete it and pretend it never happened.
And you need to do that without an audience of thousands watching you.
Exactly. Because the moment you have an audience, two very dangerous things happen. First, you get the dopamine hit of being a writer without actually doing the hard, miserable work of writing.
Right. You tweet, just finished chapter 1, and you get 500 likes. Your brain goes, good job. We did it. We're a writer.
But you didn't do it. You wrote one chapter. Maybe it's a terrible chapter. But now you feel satisfied. You've cashed out the social capital of the work before the real work is even done. But the second thing is even more dangerous, the bubble.
The bub.
When you build an audience as a personality, they become your fans, your friends. They want you to succeed. So when you share snippets of your work in progress, they aren't critiquing it. They're cheering for it. Oh, this is amazing. I can't wait to read this. You're a genius.
So you completely lose your calibration. You think you're writing gold because everyone in your comments tells gold, but they're just being nice because they like your videos about writing.
You are surrounded by yes. It's an echo chamber. Now compare that to the advantage of silence. Sammy uses the example of Brandon Sanderson. Now, love him or hate him, you cannot deny that Sanderson is arguably the biggest fantasy author on the planet right now.
The man writes like a machine. It's unreal.
He does. But Sammy points out that before Brandon Sanderson ever sold a single book, he wrote, and depending on the source you look at, the number varies, somewhere between 6 and 12 full novels.
Wait, 12 novels that nobody saw?
12 complete novels that went into a drawer. 12 novels where he learned how to handle pacing, how to write a satisfying ending, how to fix a glaring plot hole. He failed in the dark. He had his silent year.
He got to be bad in private.
By the time he finally got published with Elantris, he wasn't a rookie making his first attempt. He was a seasoned veteran who just hadn't been seen by the public yet.
So when the spotlight finally hit him, he was ready for it. The foundation was already built.
He had the muscle memory. The AuthorTuber doesn't have that. They start a YouTube channel, they write their very first novel, and because they have 100,000 subscribers waiting for it, they feel this immense pressure to publish it.
They can't just put it in a drawer. The audience demands the product.
Exactly. So what we're reading as the public is their practice swings.
We are reading their trash. We are reading the book that Brandon Sanderson would have burned, but they publish it because the business of being an influencer demands it.
Right.
That is, it's actually tragic when you think about it. It's like the fame traps them in mediocrity because they never get the quiet time they need to actually get good.
It's a developmental prison of their own making. And Sammy brings up specific examples to prove this isn't just a theory. He talks about Jenna Morici.
Ah, she's a huge name in that AuthorTube space.
Huge. Sammy says he used to watch her videos back in 2016, and he says they were genuinely great. She was funny, she was sharp, she broke down complex writing topics in an accessible way. He was actually learning from her.
So he was a fan.
He was a fan. So naturally, as a fan, he bought her book, E, The Awakening.
What was the verdict?
He describes the experience as shocking.
Shocking good or shocking bad?
Shocking bad. Utterly, shockingly bad. He said he couldn't reconcile the two people in his head. How can the woman who so brilliantly explains how to write compelling dialogue write dialogue that sounds like wooden robots talking to each other?
It's the chasm between theory and practice.
It is. It's one thing to know how a car engine works in theory. It's another thing entirely to build a working Ferrari in your garage.
And then there's the second example from the source, which I think is even more damning, Meglator.
Oh, this one is rough. This one hurts. Meglator ran a very popular channel called I Write Early. And her brand wasn't just I'm a writer who makes videos. Her brand was I'm an industry expert.
She had credentials, right?
She did. She worked at a literary agency. So her whole pitch was, I know what agents want. I've seen the flush pile. I know why manuscripts get rejected. I hold the keys to the castle.
That is a massive claim to authority. She is positioning herself not just as a peer, but as the
gatekeeper who will sell you the map. She even sold courses in consulting on how to write query letters that get you a traditional publishing. But then she released her own book, The Cyborg Tinker.
And how did that go?
Sammy claims the book fails at the most basic level, the very first sentence. He calls the prose abysmal. He points out structural issues, pacing issues, fundamental storytelling issues. But here is the supreme, painful irony of it all. Meglator, the woman who sells courses on how to get traditionally published, had to self-publish her own book.
Wait, really? She couldn't get a deal from an agent or a publisher?
We don't know the exact behind-the-scenes details, of course, but the implication from Sammy is pretty clear. The book wasn't good enough to pass the very gatekeepers she claimed to have the secret formula for.
Wow. That hurts to hear. It's really brutal. But it also raises a really serious ethical question, doesn't it? Because at that point, it's not just about writing a bad book. It's about taking money from people under false pretenses.
And this is where the deep dive gets a little dark. We move from artistic failure to what Sammy sees as ethical failure.
Because if I'm selling you a course on how to be a Michelin star chef, and then you come to my house for dinner and I serve you raw chicken on a paper plate, have I scammed you?
Sammy would say absolutely yes. He gets very, very heated in this section of the transcript. He views it as a fundamental deception. He says that if you are selling consulting or courses or how-to guides, you are making a claim to authority. If your own output, your own book, proves that authority is hollow, you are effectively stealing from desperate, aspiring writers who are looking for real help.
He uses let's say, a very colorful analogy here.
Well, he does. He's not one to mince words. He compares it to religious figures. He says, imagine if Jesus or Muhammad didn't follow their own scripture. And then he says, and this is a direct quote, "If you don't practice what you preach, shut the F up."
It's crude, but it perfectly captures that feeling of betrayal. You trusted this person to guide you, and you feel like they led you right off a cliff.
Speaking of betrayal and sketchy behavior, we have to talk about the review scandal.
Oh, this part. This section of the transcript felt like a digital forensics investigation. It gets wild.
It really does. So, circling back to Meg Latour and her book, The Cyborg Tinker, when the book launched, people who track this stuff noticed something very strange happening on Goodreads.
Goodreads, the digital battlefield for all book-related drama.
Always. So, on a single day, he specifies February 28, 2021, there was a sudden, massive influx of 5-star reviews for her book.
Like how many? A dozen.
Way more. Enough to statistically pop the book's average rating way up. But it wasn't just the sheer number. It was the quality of the accounts leaving the reviews. Many of them appeared to be empty profiles. No pictures, no history, just created that day. Or, and this is the smoking gun, many of them had only reviewed one other book. Let me guess. A book by one of her friends in the author. You hit the nail on the head. A specific friend's book. So it looked like a coordinated attack, or rather, a coordinated inflation of the score.
So what was the accusation? That she bought bot? Was it a click farm operation?
That was the immediate allegation floating around. Now, Meg Latour denied it. She put out a statement suggesting it might be overzealous fans, or maybe it was a result of a readathon event where her book was being featured.
What's Sammy's verdict on this? Does he think she did it?
Surprisingly, he actually defends her on the buying accusation, but for a very pragmatic, almost cynical reason. He says, and I'm paraphrasing, "Buying all your fake reviews on a single day is strategically dumb."
Lives. He's saying she's too smart to be that obvious about cheating.
Basically, he's like, if you were going to cheat the system, you'd drip feed them over the course of a month to make it look organic. So he thinks she didn't personally swipe her credit card for a bot, sir.
Okay, so if it wasn't bots that she paid for, what was it? Where did all these reviews?
He thinks it's the clique, the bubble we were talking about earlier, but weaponized. He believes the AuthorTube community operates like a cartel. They hype each other's mediocrity to create the illusion of success. It's an unspoken agreement. I'll give your bad book 5 stars if you give my bad book 5 stars.
It's an echo chamber of toxic positivity that they then present to the outside world as legitimate success.
It is. And it completely destroys the validity of the review system. If every influencer book automatically has a 4.8-star rating because all their friends and fans propped it up on day one, how is a regular reader supposed to know what's actually good?
They don't. Not until they buy it and get a few chapters in and realize the emperor has no clothes.
Exactly. The trust is broken.
Throughout these transcripts, amidst all this heavy talk about ethics, fraud, and death of art, there is this one recurring pure chaos that I love. And we have to talk about the
Mad Queen, yes.
Yeah.
We cannot ignore her. She is a vital part of the source material.
For the listener who hasn't seen the original video, Sammy is recording this serious, angry, intellectual critique. He's breaking down the moral failures of writers. And in the background, constantly, you just hear this ripping sound, tearing.
It's his cat. He has a cat named the Mad Queen, and she is systematically, with intense focus, destroying a cardboard tissue box while he tries to record.
And he keeps stopping the whole video to yell at her, "Stop it! What are you doing?" And then without missing a beat, he just goes right back into his critique of author.
It's a hilarious detail, but I think it actually serves a metatextual purpose, whether Sammy intended it to or not.
How so? What do you mean by that?
Well, think about the aesthetic of the influence. What does a typical AuthorTube video look like?
It's perfect. It's pristine. There are ring lights. There are color-coded bookshelves in the background. It has sharp, edited cut. There's soft, inspirational music. It's a performance of competence.
Right. It's a curated facade. It's all about polish. And then you have Sammy. He's visibly sweaty because it's summer, and he says he can't run the AC while recording because of the noise. The lighting is bad. And his cat is literally tearing up trash in the back.
It's completely unpolished.
It's real. The Mad Queen tearing up the tissue is, in a way, more honest than the carefully crafted brand of the experts he is criticizing. It grounds the listener. This isn't a performance. It's just a guy in a room telling you what he really thinks chaos.
That's a great point. It really emphasizes that truth doesn't always look pretty. Sometimes truth is a sweaty guy in a poorly lit room yelling at a cat.
Laughs. Put that on a motivational poster.
But this brings us to the final arc of the deep dive. And this is the part that I think redeems Sammy from just being a hate, because it's easy to sit on the sidelines and throw stones at what other people are creating. But Sammy, he didn't just stay on the sidelines.
No. And this is the twist that makes the whole critique land with so much more weight. Sammy reveals that he used to be an author too.
He was one of them. He was in the bubble.
He was. He made the advice videos. He tried to teach people how to write. He was part of the very ecosystem that he is now trying to burn down.
So what changed? Why isn't he still selling courses on how to plot your novel?
He had a moment of brutal, honest self-reflection. He sat down and he read his own work, and he realized, and he uses these exact words in the transcript, that he was a shush writer.
Wow. You do not hear that admission often, especially not from someone who has a microphone and a platform.
Never. The ego protection is usually too strong. But because he realized he couldn't practice what he preached, he felt it was profoundly unethical to keep giving advice. He realized he was falling into the same expert trap he now criticized, so he stopped.
He pivoted the entire channel.
He completely changed his content. He went from teaching to reviewing. He realized that just because he can analyze a story doesn't mean he can build one from scratch. He respected the craft of writing enough to step away from pretending he was a master of it.
That is a lesson in integrity that is so rare online.
It really is. He does make one exception, though, which I find interesting. He says the one thing he still feels qualified to critique is character.
Why character specifically?
Because he feels that's the one area he understands on a deep, intuitive level. Remember his critiques of Twilight and Throne of Glass? His issue is always with character motivation and depth. He feels he has a strong grasp, but the technical mechanics of plotting or the nuances of beautiful prose, he stays silent because he knows he hasn't mastered.
He accepted the advantage of silence for himself.
He did. He put himself back into the student chair. And I think that's where we find the real actionable lesson of this entire deep dive.
So let's bring it all together. We've gone from the not for you audience problem to the cynical merch versus art disaster, and finally to the advantage of silence. What is the big takeaway here for the listener?
I think the big picture is about the danger of the modern feedback. We live in an era where we can get instant validation for almost anything we do. You can post a picture of a drawing you just started or a snippet of code or the first paragraph of a book, and people will immediately double tap the screen and tell you good job.
And that feels good. Our brains are wired to love that.
It feels fantastic. It's a dopamine rush.
Yeah.
But it's so dangerous for real growth. Because when an audience cheers for the personality, the friend they feel they know, they weren't necessarily cheering for the work itself. They are cheering for the idea of you doing the work.
Right.
And if you mistake that applause for genuine quality control, you're going to stop growing. You'll freeze your skill level right where it is.
You end up releasing products instead of art. You end up with a book like Zenith.
Or The Cyborg Tinkerer. You build a house of cards on a foundation of sand because you never took the time to build a real foundation in private.
So what?
Yeah.
Here, the thing you should take away is really about
patience and competence. It's about being brave enough to be bad in private, to have your silent year, to write your 12 bad novels, or paint your 50 bad canvas, or code your 10 buggy app without posting them on Instagram for validation.
It's asking yourself a really hard question. Do I want to be a writer, or do I just want to be seen as a writer?
That is the million-dollar question for every creator today.
I want to leave the listener with one final thought to mull over. We've talked about how the advantage of silence might be dead, or at least dying, in the age of social media. We are all content creators in some way.
We are. We all have a platform, even if it's small.
So are we doomed? Are we heading for a future where the only books that get published are mediocre merchandise from famous TikTokers? Or will the true masters always be the ones who refuse to show their work until it's actually ready?
I'd like to believe that quality wins in the end, that real art finds a way, but you have to be willing to do the work in the dark first.
Next time you pick up a book, or even when you look at your own creative projects, ask yourself that question: is this a product or is it art?
And did I give it enough silence to really grow into what it could be?
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a fascinating and slightly terrifying trip through the wreckage of internet.
Always a pleasure. A lot to think about there.
See you next time.